So as another year comes to a close, the domestic violence outrage industry tallies up the dead bodies of Australian women to remind us of why violence against women, and by implication misogyny, is the biggest problem facing Australia today. Except that it isn't. Destroy the Joint is a group of hysterical infants that misrepresent statistics about violence against women to push their false narrative that men are all evil and women are helpless victims, and thus men need to be re-educated or brainwashed into hating their own toxic masculinity. According to Destroy the Truth, Joint, 71 Australian women have been killed in 2016 due to violence against women. Now, of course, our own beloved Prime Minister is fond of talking about domestic violence as violence against women, resulting from men not respecting women.
The issue of family violence, or domestic violence as it's often called, which is just violence against women, which is the way I would prefer to describe it.
Not all disrespect of women ends up in violence against women. But all violence against women begins with disrespecting women. And the single most important thing each and every one of us can do as parents, especially, as fathers and as mothers, is to make sure that our sons respect their mothers and their sisters.
So the answer, according to our beloved Prime Minister, is to teach boys to respect their mothers and sisters, even though, as I've shown time and time again, women have worse attitudes towards violence against men than vice versa. So although not explicitly stated, the subtext is that those 71 violent deaths of women is a result of those violent males. And this is deliberate. The average person not acquainted with the specifics on domestic violence statistics and listens to the mainstream media narrative would just assume that this is men killing women. But even a cursory glance at Destroy the Joint's own statistics call their tally into question. For example, on October 28, Radika Zafirovska, 54, was found battered to death at her home at the Gap in Brisbane's west this morning. Her daughter, Simona Zafirovska, 20, has been charged with murder. Or how about this one from January 5th? Valeria Firmenjan, 70, died of injuries after an attack which police believed occurred during a burglary at her home in Melville. Her body was found by her daughter on January 7. No further details are available at present. So clearly this list of 71 murdered women includes any woman that was a victim of violence, regardless of the perpetrator or the motive. But remember, the intention is to not make such distinctions. It is to portray men as the evil perpetrators. So I could go through this entire document and separate out deaths from genuine intimate partner violence from other types, but I don't need to, because the wonderful Jasmine Newman has already done the heavy lifting. Now first I want to read Jasmine's critique of Destroy the Joint. Quote, "The problem with Destroy the Joint is they went off half-cocked out of the gate and attribute every death of a woman to domestic violence. They set up their page and told the blind faithful that this was the problem, and the faithful followed. It's somewhat ironic that radical feminists denounced Christianity so quickly, only to reinvent the blind belief wheel for their own agenda. But I digress. Destroy the Joint continue to make out that when a woman is murdered by a man known to her, that this indicates domestic violence. It does not, but that makes for a healthy smokescreen to the faithful. They are quite comfortable knowing that hysteria has been built around their word, even though it isn't true. It is made for good, easy pickings for lazy journalists, and they created an epidemic where there was none. The government stepped up to their virtue signalling and decided to stamp out domestic violence by blaming all men for the actions of a minuscule percentage. And yet, despite them subsequently spending millions in a male-bashing media campaign to stamp out sexism where it starts, our infant boys, people still keep murdering each other. And that's what the statistics show. According to Jasmine, of the 71 women that died as a result of violence this year, 8 were killed by other women. And of the 63 that remained, 38 were the result of domestic violence from a male partner. 25 are not the result of domestic violence and include drug crimes or random street violence, like the example mentioned previously. But wait, there's more. It turns out that, astonishingly, women murder people too. According to the folks that Destroy the Narrative, set up in opposition to Destroy the Joint, 38 women have been charged with murder or been responsible for the murder-suicide of a child in 2016. 24 of these incidents have involved domestic and family violence, including 5 children. 19 men were killed in family or domestic violence, 9 women were killed by other women, and 5 children were murdered by mothers. So the breakdown for 2016 shows that 2/3 of domestic violence murders were women murdered by men, and 1/3 were men murdered by women. Now, as Jasmine noted, some of these cases still have ongoing investigations, and the complete statistics will not be available until the police and the coroner's office have officially signed off. So ironically, in the wake of Donald Trump's election victory, the left-wing media has now resorted to blaming fake news for a misinformed public. However, the left has been peddling fake news with respect to major feminist talking points for at least a decade, and nowhere has that been more prevalent than on the issue of domestic violence, with the possible exception of the pay gap. So as I've mentioned in a previous video, a good rule of thumb to remember is that there is usually an inverse relationship between feminist hysteria and alleged epidemics. I just want to give a special shout out to all of my patrons that have supported me throughout the year. Every dollar really does make a difference. Thanks again. And of course, don't forget to smash the like button, subscribe, or consider supporting me on Patreon. See you next time.